Lotus Cars is a very small automotive company founded on firm beliefs. Despite recurring financial difficulties, they've managed to create some of the best road cars in the past 70 years and have really helped form Formula One as we know it today. So how did this small automotive sports car manufacturer get their start? The founder of Lotus Cars, Colin Chapman, built his first race car in the year 1948 while studying structural engineering at the University of London. Called the Mark I, it was based off the chassis of an Austin Healey and designed to compete in British trial racing. After building a Mark II and a Mark III, he took a 50-pound loan from his girlfriend to turn his hobby into a business, the Lotus Engineering Company. That same year, 1952, they built their first real series production car called the Mark VI. 2 years later, the Lotus racing team was officially founded, and Chapman continued to perfect his race cars with the Marks 8, 9, and 10. In 1956, Chapman designed the Lotus 11, which was designed for racing, but he also wanted to sell just a few road cars to help gather more funds for the racing team. The next year, Lotus brought out the Lotus 7 Club Racer, which could be bought as a kit or as a pre-built car. But the highlight of 1957 was the Lotus Type 14 Elite, a car built mostly for road use. Chapman wasn't really that interested in production cars, but he hoped that by offering the car to the public, he could make a load of cash to further invest in his racing team. The year 1958 ushered in a new era for the Lotus Car Company as they entered the world of Formula One. Unfortunately, their first F1 car, the Lotus 12, really didn't compete that well. The best it could manage was a 4th place finish. So Lotus went back to the drawing board and came back 2 years later with the mid-engined Lotus Type 18, which helped them win their first Formula One Grand Prix. Over the next few decades, Colin Chapman's genius and knowledge in structural engineering and car technology introduced a ton of new technologies to Formula One. They were the first to have a car with a reclined seating position in Formula One, the first to use a monocoque chassis, the first to use the engine as their structural component, the first to have sponsored livery, the first to manage underbody airflow to increase downforce. Just a ton of first new technologies were introduced to Formula One through Colin Chapman and the Lotus racing team that really greatly influenced Formula One as we know it today. In 1962, the Lotus Elan was introduced with a Ford-based 4-cylinder engine. This car was produced for 11 years and is considered one of Lotus's first popular road cars. In 1966, the mid-engine Europa was introduced to the lineup, which received praise for its handling but not necessarily its design. Moving on to the 1970s, Lotus unveiled the Ital-design Esprit in 1972. And when it finally entered production just 4 years later, it received huge praise and success, reaching almost 30 years of production with multiple models, including the Esprit Turbo, V8, and Sport 300. It was also featured in a couple James Bond spy movies, which resulted in worldwide brand recognition and really helped sales keep going for Lotus in the 80s and 90s when they were unfortunately experiencing some financial difficulties. Sadly, the founder of Lotus, Colin Chapman, passed away in late 1982 as a result of a heart attack, and after that, the company really began to go downhill. They were sold to General Motors 4 years later, and they introduced a new Esprit and a new model, the Lotus Carlton, but General Motors was also experiencing some financial difficulties, so they didn't hold on to the company for very long. At this point, Lotus entered a period where they were switching through management multiple times, and by 1995, they were even forced to disband the Formula One team just to reduce company costs. Luckily, things really began to turn around for Lotus soon afterwards. Shortly after disbanding their Formula One team in '95, they introduced the Lotus Elise, a small 2-seater sports coupe capable of going 0 to 60 in 5.8 seconds. And it was a huge success, selling 1,000 cars just in 2 years by 1997. At the start of the 21st century, Lotus introduced another model to the lineup called the Lotus Exige, and from the outside it looked basically the same as an Elise, but it was actually under the hood a higher performance version of that model, and it too sold pretty well. The Esprit was finally put to rest in the year 2003, leaving a bit of a gap in the lineup for 5 years until this car was unveiled in 2008, the Lotus Evora. Powered by a 3.5-liter supercharged V6 engine and equipped with gorgeous exterior styling, the Evora was a huge success. And when you pair that with Lotus's partnership with Tesla Motors and their all-electric Roadster, the company was finally gaining some funds back, getting back on their feet, and getting in pretty good financial standing. This enabled the company to reform its Formula One team in 2010, which of course made Lotus fans really happy because that's what the company was originally all about. In 2015, we saw the introduction of Lotus's current lineup with a replacement to the Evora called the Evora Sport 400 and their Lotus 11 track car. Although Lotus is still experiencing a few financial problems, their future does look bright. Earlier this year, they just announced a new supercar that will rank above the Evora and will be unveiled in 2020, and rumors have it that it will be a successor to the famous Lotus Esprit. Wait a minute, Lotus just announced an SUV for 2020? Colin Chapman must be rolling in his grave. This is disgusting. Lotus is going to go out of production in the next 5 years, without a doubt. So there you go, guys. That's the full history of the Lotus Cars company. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, comment your thoughts below, and go ahead and check out my channel, so I've got a ton of exotic supercar and hypercar reviews up. So remember to subscribe, and thanks for watching.